Chapter 22. The New Normal. Trauma was a funny thing. In the week prior, his best friend had been killed sacrificing herself on his behalf. They lost Johnny with no real evidence he was still alive. The squad was forced to undergo a new secondary mission to clear the safe house, after which they endured just over a day of false security before they were attacked again and nearly executed for reasons completely unknown to any of them. Kent had compiled that reality and thought about it only a handful of times. Every other moment he spent dreading coming home without someone to watch Liz's stupid British TV shows with. Once he was finally back in the common room, that dread became a reality. He could have spent hours replaying the image of her death over his eyes. Anything would beat the sheer emptiness and boredom that accompanied her absence. He'd felt it in the safe house too, but things became infinitely worse when they returned home, when he was reminded of her bedroom door staring at him like some opaque gate to the happiness he could never live again. He'd stopped trying to fight the tears from flowing. When he was incapable of producing anymore, his world filled with that now familiar emptiness, and he found himself longing to be back in China, distracted from reality by the necessity to fight something, even if he had to break his leg over and over again to escape it. The squad had been transported back to Julian before sunrise. Whatever emergency code Xander issued was given top priority without question. They gathered their real things immediately and boarded a private company plane which took them directly from the city to Tylersville, with only a single stop for refueling coming by way of Anchorage. It was on this flight that the new reality without Liz really sank in. Margot, who had virtually disappeared once they had settled into the safe house, had once again taken to keeping Kent company, checking his leg which had been hastily reset in Julian, and providing some form of consolation like she had done in the van after the mission. He appreciated the gesture, knowing she too had felt close with Liz in some capacity, but felt awkward every time Jordan looked back at the pair of them, seemingly intimidated that his time with his girlfriend was being taken away. They landed in Tylersville late Saturday morning. The airport was virtually empty, save for a somber welcoming party consisting of Emma's family and Xander's wife. It took Kent a moment to recognize Andrew, who looked emaciated and exhausted, losing perhaps 30 pounds since the last time he'd seen him. He looked solemnly at Emma when they exited the plane. She broke down and fell into him, and he hugged her and cried alongside Jordan and Margot. Once they returned to the common room, Xander helped lay the foundation of their new normal. Given that Kent could once again not climb the stairs to his bedroom, and Johnny's room was empty, Xander ordered him to move into Johnny's old space. Kent was hesitant, expecting Emma to object for sentimental reasons, but she was apparently all for it. The only one who even seemed slightly bothered was Jordan, but he yielded after Xander told Kent to leave Johnny's things in the drawers. The rest of the day was awkward. After Xander had warned them that Monday's training time was to be replaced by their debriefing interviews with the embassy, he walked out the door and let them be, leaving the four of them to their own devices as though nothing at all had happened, as if this were just a normal Saturday afternoon. In actuality, that's exactly how it turned out. As soon as Xander was gone, Margot and Jordan disappeared to his room and never emerged. Emma, who would usually have pulled Johnny with her to do something to fill their day, went off alone, announcing that she was going to visit her brother Andrew now that he was back in town. That left Kent alone in the common room, Liz no longer there to distract him from the thoughts swarming in the second by himself. He could not bring himself to watch either of their usual shows. Even golf had lost its allure, though this was mainly due to his hesitation to watch that out in the open. He could lock himself away in Johnny's room, but that felt somehow disrespectful, and the longer he spent there without sleeping, the more he felt like an intruder into someone else's private space. Eventually he settled on racing highlights, though after several minutes he began to zone out and find his headspace once again consumed by the image of Liz at the moment of her death. It was impossible to escape. Terrified and alone, Kent wrapped himself in a blanket on one of the living room chairs and tried desperately to fall asleep, but to no avail. Time seemed to move both too fast and too slow. Every time he checked the clock over the stove, it remained the same as the last time he looked. Finally, he gave in to the thoughts and suffered through what felt like minutes of little nightmares, only to find that now hours had passed. Night was the exact same. Struggling to fall asleep in the unfamiliar room, he tried to quiet himself with a random movie, but once again found himself reliving the same visions over and over, until he couldn't take anymore, consigned himself to Johnny's shower, and broke down on the dry floor. He woke the next morning naked on the bathroom mat, struggling to remember how he'd finished the night in that position. The next morning, Emma didn't even bother inviting him to church. By all signs, Margot and Jordan were still in their rooms, but desperate to not be alone for a second day, Kent struggled to change his own clothes and hobbled on his crutches across the ice to the school for breakfast, miraculously making it without a fall. Of all possible Sundays, that evening was the Super Bowl. Further struggling up the steps to the main entrance, Kent found himself one of maybe a quarter of the student body not outfitted in a football jersey, with the largest chunk of the minority sporting the navy and silver he was wise enough to recognize as the New England Patriots. For a moment he thought he spotted Emma wearing one too, which he thought odd, though the jersey was not far off from the one she usually wore. That Houston team Kent could not put a name to. As he watched the girl intently, however, he realized she was far too tall to be Emma, and once she turned around, her similar hair gave way to a face that was significantly different. After trying his best at eating something for the first time in days, Kent found the game day-themed Coast vs. Coast menu underwhelming, and tossed the majority of his plate before waltzing his way back to the common room. This time he did suffer a fall, slamming his shoulder hard into the pavement to the watchful eyes of a dozen onlookers, none of whom were close enough to even ask if he was all right. Struggling back to his feet, he ached the rest of the way to the residential center before slugging down the halls to the door, where he realized with horrified embarrassment that his keycard must have fallen out of his pocket during the fall. Pulling out his phone, he called both Jordan and Margot, only the latter picking up before he heard her hastily rush to the door and let him in, looking like she had just been thrown in a clothes dryer. "Why'd you leave alone?" she scolded, noting the snow melting against his side. Ken felt his face redden, struggling to even find the courage to explain himself. Left alone again, as she returned to Jordan's room, Kent was joined in his solitude by a returning Emma, who looked shockingly happy. After quiet pleasantries, she announced that her parents had left town on an emergency business trip, leaving their plans for the evening up in the air. She mentioned the school usually put it on the back wall of the cafeteria, but after Kent voiced his wish to simply stay home, Emma appeared to change her mind on the spot, and convinced a still irritated Margot and Jordan to reemerge and put together a little 4-person watch party. Kent could not have felt more out of place. While Emma whisked around the kitchen putting together appetizer trays and meat platters from what little they had left in their food supply, Margot and Jordan managed to make themselves presentable and throw on their own jerseys. Margot a garish orange thing she explained as their local team, the Denver Broncos. "I swear to God, after last year, I hope the Seahawks choke on Tom Brady's deflated—" "Margot!" Emma interrupted, before Margot threw up her hands and plopped down on the couch beside Kent. He'd never actually watched the game before, and found himself bored senseless by the hours of short films and promotions prior to the start of the event. At one point, he tried to remove himself by using the bathroom, but Emma must have sent Jordan to spy on him. Returning to the bedroom proper, Jordan pulled Kent back into the common room to be part of the group. The game was even worse. American football was, in Kent's eyes, the most uneventful sport ever created. Each movement to play lasted no more than 10 seconds, preceded and followed every single time by minutes of resetting the field. He found himself desperate for the gameplay to halt for a commercial break, but even those attempts at comedy fell flat. The highlight of the night was Katy Perry riding into the halftime show on a giant lion, accompanied by an awkwardly dancing man in a shark costume, but the feeling of rejuvenation he felt disappeared almost immediately after the initial shock. By that point, the other three had not included him in their conversations in over an hour, and as the game continued, Kent felt more and more like an afterthought. Something major happened right at the end of the game, which apparently shocked all three of them into silence. Knowing nothing about football, he neither knew nor cared enough to ask what the big deal was, but the others all sat shell-shocked, shaking their heads until the recognizable mug of Tom Brady was holding up a pair of trophies. Jordan was the first to speak. "Well?" he coughed, turning to Margot. "You got your wish." Margot's mouth was still agape. Then she swore loudly. None of them acknowledged Kent as they cleaned up the bags and plates around the room. He sat there still as a statue, almost enjoying how invisible he appeared before them. 20 full minutes passed, by which point Jordan had disappeared into his room, and Margot and Emma were finishing up dishes in the sink, still talking about the game over the sound of running water. Kent reached for the remote and turned off the TV. Emma's head shot around at the sudden absence of the sound. "What'd you do that for?" she hollered, catching Kent in his tracks. "I thought it was over," he defended. She opened her mouth to speak. "It is, but—" She paused. "Never mind, I can watch postgame in my room." With that, she turned back to the sink and drained it, and the girls headed off to their respective doors, hardly saying goodnight as they passed him. Again, Kent found himself silent and furious, alone in the common room. But as the anger from being dragged into their evening stood, he suddenly longed for the girls to return as dread took its place. He returned to the chair and closed his eyes, but the image was plastered to the back of his eyelids. When he opened them again, it was to the sound of Emma's bedroom door opening. Looking at the clock, he had apparently fallen asleep, and hours had passed since the girls had said goodnight. Buds in her ears, Emma was dressed in a gray tank top and loose-fitting pajama pants. Not noticing him, Kent watched as she traipsed carelessly over to the kitchen, pulled out a glass from the top cabinet, then leaned down to grab a clear bottle from below the sink, filling the glass before returning the bottle. She leaned back to crack her back, then grabbed the glass and walked back toward her room. She must have only just realized the lights were on in the common room, as she stopped, took a glance up at the ceiling, then turned to find Kent sitting still in the far chair. Emma nearly dropped the glass in her hand. "Holy hell!" she breathed, blinking fast. "What?" "Nothing." She shook her head, pulling out her earbuds. You forgot I existed?" Kent said defensively. "Of course not," she backed. "I just forgot you were down here." Kent whistled through his nose. "Same thing." "Shut up," she glared. "It's most certainly not the same thing." "No?" he growled. "For 5 months, her and I were up there shut off in our own little world. And the four of you never, even once, thought to check on us. That is factually untrue, Emma railed. In case you forgot, this isn't the first time your leg has been in a cast. All four of us helped you up and down those stairs, and every time we offered to help you with anything else, you just turned it away. Ken felt his face redden. And are you really going to blame you feeling left out on the architecture of this freaking building? She continued. I'm sorry the four of us grew up together and the room perfectly adheres to that. You're down here now. Maybe you should stop complaining about the past and get over yourself. Kent laughed. Get over myself? He raised. Yeah, she barked. Honestly, get your self-righteous head out of your ass and maybe stop making everything about you every time you're inconvenienced. My best friend is dead and you're telling me to get over myself. In case you forgot, she was our friend too, Emma replied. Just because you shared a wall with her bedroom doesn't mean the rest of us aren't affected by it too. Your friend? He scoffed. When did you ever do anything nice for her? Emma's face dropped to a disappointed scowl. Really? Are you really going to fight me about this right now? Why not? Kent rallied. When did you ever show the slightest instance of caring about someone other than yourselves? Christ alive, Emma breathed. Do you think you're the only person I ever took for a walk around town? Do you know how many times I offered to take her out or try to do things to make her feel more at home while she was here? Margot took her to the freaking mountains, for God's sake, Kent. Do you ever open your eyes, or do you just think your little echo chamber is the only thing that exists in the world? She moved around the couch to stare at him directly over the living room table. Do you think I'm not heartbroken about the fact she's gone? She continued. Do you think I'm not praying every single day about her parents, or her siblings, or anyone else who even remotely knows the story of her brother? You didn't give a damn about her after the mission, he retorted. Emma's jaw clenched. What? You didn't give a single care in the world that she was dead, he repeated. As soon as you found out it was Johnny this and Johnny that, and as soon as you had even the slightest notion that he was still alive, you forgot all about Liz. Forgot? She squealed, practically raising her voice to a shout. Do you think you have any clue how I felt at the safe house? Any at all? I acted the way I did because someone had to do something. None of us were out of danger until we were back home. I did what I had to do to make sure I could focus enough to get us that far if I had to. Kent scoffed. Well, how noble of you, he sneered. Thank you for doing your part in keeping us safe. She moved even closer, practically towering over him in the chair. Shut up, she clawed. Her teeth gritted, smoke practically bellowing from her nostrils. Shut the hell up or I will smack your perfect little teeth out of your jaw. Kent held his breath, shocked by her suddenly dropping her voice. Look, I'm sorry you broke your leg again. I genuinely am. But do not criticize me for doing everything in my stupid, powerless ability to cling to the tiny glimpse of hope that Johnny might be alive, so I could do what little I'm able to do to stop the rest of you from leaving me too. She covered her face with her hands, tears dripping between the cracks in her fingers. Ken felt his Adam's apple drop to his chest. Emma, don't you dare! She screamed, so loudly Kent worried that the others might come out and join them. Emma dropped her hands, revealing eyes so bloodshot she looked demonic, tears streaming down her white cheeks. Don't you dare imply that I don't care. Ever. About you, about Liz, about anyone in this squad or outside these doors, because the reality is I am haunted by the fact that I can't do more because of who I am. Her implication finally struck him. Ken could feel the color draining from his face. Emma, I'm sorry, he breathed. I didn't mean... And now you get to laugh at me, she squeaked, her voice breaking. Because now I'm the one with egg all over my face because this is exactly the situation why I never wanted a freaking boyfriend. And who knows... She couldn't finish the sentence. Emma collapsed out on the middle of the couch, her hands again covering her face, failing to stop everything from pouring out of her. Ken felt something pull him to his feet, as little as he could manage, and transfer himself to the seat beside her. Unsure what to do, he put his arm at her back for comfort. Emma fell into him, sobbing hard into his shoulder while Kent could do nothing but hold her and let her cry. It went on for minutes. Whatever grudge he had held in the preceding argument was completely gone, replaced by the single desire to make sure Emma was all right. When her crying started to lessen, he tried to comfort her with words. They haven't found anything? He asked. Nothing, she choked, still fighting through tears. I talked to my dad this afternoon. He never made it to the embassy. Well, that doesn't it? She snorted. God knows where he ended up then. If he's even still alive. The sorrow in her voice was lacking hope. Well, maybe he tried to make it back to the safe house on his own, Kent tried. Or Juliang, or on foot? She shook her head, starting to calm. Or you think he hijacked a vehicle to drive a day to the west? He'd have better luck making it to No Curry at that rate. Kent tried to remember the hub cities they had learned in history class. Japan? It's the only other reasonable option, she sighed. It's still an option, Kent reasoned. Emma almost smiled. Or maybe he just never got out of the office, she darkened. Maybe those psychos who attacked us at the house were meant to finish us off. Maybe they had another team out to capture Johnny and get as far away from China as they could before the company found out. Kent shrugged. Maybe you're right, he acknowledged. Maybe Johnny's worth something to those people. Emma actually did smile this time. Now you're sounding like me, she said. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Kent expected her to sit up and move away, but instead she stayed seated beside him, leaving his arm around her shoulder, and nuzzled into him. He felt his heart increase, but Emma seemed completely unbothered. As if reading his mind, Emma spoke up, her voice still soft and sad, but the fear and dread disappeared. Do you know why I kept telling you no? Kent blinked, not sure he had heard the question correctly. What? At the start of the year, she repeated, still nuzzled into his shoulder. I didn't reject you for anything you did. Kent swallowed. I know, he managed. I don't need you to apologize. I'm not apologizing, she claimed. I want you to know I care about you. We all do. Kent tried to rack his brain as to why Emma was saying this now. He caught sight of his cast and remembered the order right before it was broken. Emma, he pushed. If this is about what they said in the safe house, you don't have... Would you shut up and let me talk to you? She cracked, finally pushing herself up so she could look him in the eyes. That last bit was from all of us, yes, but this part's from me, she continued, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. I think I fear what I don't know. That's why my dad scares me so much. He's a politician. Of course he's got secrets. I got through the rest of China believing in some kind of hope that Johnny made it out okay. She looked into his face with the most genuine expression she'd ever given him. If I ever acted like I hated you, I think it's because you scared me. A bewildered smile crept across Kent's face. I scared you? He echoed. How did I scare you? Emma shook her head. You don't know me at all, do you? She noted. Before he could respond, she added, I spent the last 5 years of my life in the shadow of the hottest girl in town. My sister, my best friend, who every single boy I know would give their right arm to be with. She's been with me every single day of my life since I was 10 years old. My brother Andrew has the exact same ability to charm anyone he wants. And me? Emma held up her hands. I look like this. Like some prepubescent child who will only ever be Margot's little sister. And the only thing of significance I have to offer is the fact that I'm not significant. That I'm one of maybe, a handful of people in the entire school without an effect? Kent sighed. Emma, let me finish, she scolded. And then, one day, right when I'm at the point where I have to put on this brave face and pretend I'm ready to face the world, God drops this cute boy at my feet who not only knows nothing about me or even my dad, but then lets me know that, hey, maybe I'm wanted for a change. Emma smiled, tears returning to her eyes. Do you know how much that meant to me? Ken couldn't find the words to respond. He sat there, mouth agape, trying to comprehend the bizarreness of the situation in front of him. And I'm sorry I didn't give you the courtesy of making you feel the same. Emma sniffled, wiping her nose again. Emma, Kent managed, you don't have to apologize. This isn't about me saying no, she said coolly. I'm sorry if I made you feel like you didn't belong here because of the way I responded to you being kind. Again, Kent struggled to find words to form a response. And I'm most sorry about the fact that the one person you felt cared by was taken away from you. Kent's mind had been nowhere near Liz. Thinking of her now, he felt himself filling with emotions of his own. Desperate to suppress them, he shifted his focus. Why do I scare you? He asked. Emma appeared taken back by his question. What? You said I scared you, he repeated. How do I scare you? Emma took a moment to recompose herself. I told you, she said. I think I fear things I don't know. Kent shrugged. Well, he began. What do you want to know? Emma laughed. You never talk about yourself, she pointed. That's what scares me the most. Why? Kent shrugged. Maybe there's nothing to tell. That's garbage and you know it, she stabbed. Tell me about your parents. Kent whitened, swallowing hard before replying. You know about my parents. I know who your parents are, she admitted. Not who they are to you. I know the Dalton Hawk the rest of the world sees. What's he like as a dad? I don't know. Kent spat faster than intended. I've never met him. His answer hung in the air like a mist. Emma's eyes narrowed, trying to comprehend what he had said. But you told me... I lied, he stated. Everything I said when you met me was a lie. Emma's face sunk. Her eyes seemed to shrink into her skull defensively. Not everything, she argued. Everything about myself, he corrected. I've never met my dad. I've never met his kids or any of his wives. I've hardly even been off Long Island, let alone traveled around with him. Emma's face darkened. Why? What do you mean, why? I mean, why pretend in the first place? Kent laughed aloud. Because I'm the new kid in high school surrounded by people who are infinitely more important to this place than I am. No one cares about the bastard of some rich guy out east who just happened to hook up with his hot mom 15 years ago. Especially not with a dad like mine. The people back in the safe house, do you know what they meant about my dad? He's a super lib, Emma. He spends hundreds of millions of dollars funding the campaigns of liberal propaganda around the country. He's the opposite of everything you believe. Do you know how nervous I was when I found out how conservative the government is here? Emma sighed, shaking her head. We're not going to shun you because your dad's a Democrat. Why not? Kent whistled. You already shunned me for being an atheist. I don't shun you for being an atheist, Emma defended. Well, Johnny certainly does, Kent spat, immediately regretting bringing up the name again. Emma closed her eyes and sighed deep to keep herself calm. Johnny is... She hesitated. Johnny's the way he is. You're right. Can he help it? No. Is it right? No. She shook her head again. I don't care what you believe, she stated. Maybe I should, but I don't. Do you think Jordan and Margot actually care about church? Jordan only does it because I think his mom would be ashamed of him if he didn't, and Margot only shows up from time to time to appease my parents. Kent frowned. Then why do you act like it's such a big deal? Because it is a big deal to me, she shouted. Because my faith is as big a part of me as anything else. I can handle you saying no to an invite. But the way you constantly insult the most important thing in my life, it's like you're going out of your way to bully me for something you don't understand. Kent sighed and hung his head. I'm sorry. And I know this probably means nothing to you, but if it seems like I'm not taking Liz's death as hard as you, it's because I believe in a God who's doing everything in his power to let me know she's all right. Don't give me that. Kent turned. Don't give me that she's in a better place crap. Emma shrugged defensively. Believe what you want to believe, she said, but don't criticize me for mine. Kent realized his arm was still sitting loosely behind Emma's back. He pulled it away and crossed them. You sound just like my mom. The comment clearly caught Emma by surprise. What does that mean? Kent gave her a sad grin, then shook his head. Nothing, he refused. Forget I said it. No, tell me. She leaned in, putting a hand on his good knee. What does that mean? Kent looked at her awkwardly. I don't want to talk about my mom, he stated. Fine, she shrugged. Stay a mystery. For a moment, she looked like she was going to stand up and leave. The need to not be alone superseded his hesitation. My mom's super Catholic, he blurted. Emma eyed him suspiciously. What? She replied. Why? He uncrossed his arms. What do you mean, why? He echoed. She's Italian, of course she's Catholic. No, I mean, like, why would she be Catholic? Emma clarified. She was a model, wasn't she? I'm guessing she wasn't showing off modestly. Plus, she hooked up with your dad and had you out of wedlock. Kent tried not to let the comment sting. That clearly you're not Catholic, he replied. Religious people do stupid things and try to justify their behavior by picking and choosing when they see fit. Every time I see you trying to pray away something bad from happening, I'm reminded of every time she left me behind to go fulfill some stupid fantasy of hers. Everything is always so perfect in your minds because you're not the ones in control of it all. And when everything falls apart the way it always does, you never take responsibility for your role in it, and you blame it all on some stupid higher power for not granting your 3 wishes straight out of the lamp. Emma swallowed hard. Ken felt his emotions rising through his face again. Do you know what it's like growing up? Seeing your dad everywhere? Making billions of dollars while you're stuck in the middle of nowhere surrounded by people you can't even talk to because even if they spoke English, just revealing who you are could violate the restraining order he has over your mom? Do you know how many times I used to wait by the front door just wishing that some other guy would walk through it and tell me my mom was wrong? To tell me he was my real father and I could finally have a real family? Do you know how many times I prayed When I was little, that my mom would just disappear for good and the state would come and take me away? Ken could feel tears bubbling under his eyes. He gestured around the room, letting his voice drop just above a whisper. I guess that one was answered. Emma leaned in again and wrapped her arms around him. Ken felt himself break. His arms surrounded her and he buried his face in her hair, letting his own tears finally fall. Listen to me, he heard her whisper. We're your family now. Whatever that means to you, whatever you need us to do for you, let us be it. If that means you never go home again, then so be it. Your place is here. She let him cry for several minutes. As he finally regained his composure, a wave of embarrassment spread through him. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't be, she answered. I know you've been holding that in a long time. She was right. Of course she was right. Emma loosened her grip and turned against him once more, nuzzling back under his arm. What do we do without them? He sniffled. Who? She replied softly. Johnny and Liz? Yeah, he managed. They're not going to let us continue with just the four of us, are they? Emma sighed. The rest of the semester they will, she stated. Squads have to start the semester full unless there's a rarity. I suppose it all depends if you want to stay or not. Ken felt himself pull away. What do you mean, if I want to stay? He barked. I thought you just said we're a family. Well, we are, she doubled. But you have the choice to transfer overseas if you want, or request a new squad placement if this one doesn't work for you. Ken focused on her hair pressed awkwardly against his arm. And if I want to stay? He would have sworn she smiled. Then you stay, she whispered. Part of the family, right? Ken took a deep breath, turning his head to look down the hallway toward the stairs. And next year, what about Liz's spot? He concerned. Some rando just takes her place? It doesn't have to be random, Emma explained. If you have someone in mind and they also request a placement, it's almost always guaranteed. Still, he said. Someone just takes her room and we go on pretending that she never existed? Of course not, she rejected. Don't pretend she wasn't someone we all loved and cared about. Yes, she's gone, but things keep moving and life goes on, as much as that might suck sometimes. She looked over at Johnny's door. Besides, you already took his room. I'll go back upstairs when I can walk, he revealed. Don't worry about it, Emma sighed. A room's just a room. Ken thought of someone else taking Liz's spot in the squad. Do you have anyone in mind? He asked. To replace her, I mean? We're not replacing her, she clarified. And no one, really. It'll probably end up being someone random from one of the older squads. She smiled for a moment. I did have one crazy idea while we were on the plane home, but I can't imagine they'll ever go for it. Kent looked down to better see her face. A wave of concern flashed over it. What do you mean? He wondered aloud. Who? Emma breathed deep. God forbid something did happen to Johnny, she began. Someone would have to take his place too. I don't know if he'd ever go for it given everything that happened, but even if there's not a place for him in our squad, I was thinking about asking my brother if he'd come home. His girlfriend, Siobhan, could fill our spot. Kent knit his eyebrows. Riley? He questioned. I thought he ran away. Well, he did, Emma confirmed. And I still don't really know why, but I figure it's been 2 years since he left. Maybe his feelings have changed. Plus, Andrew will be off at college, and Siobhan likes to travel, even if it was just for a semester. Kent was still trying to imagine someone taking Liz's place. Like I said, she continued, it's just wishful thinking. I don't know if he'd go for it. Doesn't hurt to ask, I guess, Kent noted. I know nothing about your brother, though, so I don't know either. Yeah, Emma sighed. She leaned forward to check the time on her phone before leaning back again into Kent's arm. You going to bed soon? Maybe, he admitted. I might stay out here and watch something for a bit. Johnny has a TV. Yeah, I feel weird using it. Don't, she suggested. You're sleeping in his room. It's not like you're stealing his things. Kent once again looked down at his arm around Emma's shoulder. Then maybe, he agreed. Are you? I don't know, she revealed. That's why I came out here. I haven't been able to fall asleep. It's not just Johnny being gone. I can't get the safe house out of my head. Yeah, I know how you feel. I don't know if you do, she hesitated. I'm sure the leg isn't fun to relive in your nightmares, but each night that passes, the more it weighs on me that I'm responsible for someone's death. She caught herself. Multiple someones. Ken could feel her tense up as she said it. And you don't think I get that? He asked. Emma gave a soft laugh. Sympathize with me? Sure, but you're the only one left not guilty of it. Kent frowned, remembering. What do you mean? He wondered. Of course I'm guilty of it. Emma turned her head and sat up beside him. In the safe house? She questioned. You couldn't have. You were on the ground. Margot got one, I got the rest, Jordy got the two in the embassy. If Johnny's still alive, I'm assuming he's had a kill or two. Liz had the guard in the office. Even Xander has a kill count. You're the last one left. Be grateful for it. Something she said caught him off guard. What guard? Emma narrowed her eyes. What? You said Liz killed the guard in the office. What guard? Emma looked at him cautiously. The one with the seizure, she reminded slowly. I heard you guys through the comms. She said she would take care of it. Kent's stomach dropped. So you think that means she offed him? Emma shrugged. Well, that's what it sounded like. She was telling me to get back on track to finish the mission, he raised. She didn't smother him to death. He died from that seizure. Which she caused, Emma continued. What? Well, she took him down, didn't she? He caught you off guard with the weapon, and she knocked him out with your effect. No, Emma, he growled, his throat feeling heavy. I killed him. I took him down. I was the reason he died. She shook her head. There's no way to know that, she denied. Liz played just as much a part of it as you. You can't take responsibility for something that wasn't your fault. It'll eat you alive. Kent swallowed, feeling his cheeks flush again. Emma, you don't understand, he continued. Liz had nothing to do with the seizure. I stomped his face after he was down. She stopped arguing, a look of confusion washing over her expression. What? She squeaked. Why would you do that? I don't know, okay? He screamed. I was freaking out in the moment. I was angry about the gun. I don't know why I did it, but I did. I smashed his nose with my foot, and a half hour later he was dead. Emma took a shaky breath. But you don't know that was you, she worded carefully. Maybe the seizure was on you, but we still don't know Liz wasn't the one who put him down. Think about what she said to you. I already told you, he shouted incredulously. Liz didn't do that. She wouldn't have done that. The guard's death is on my hands. You can't prove that, she continued. Kent smiled, exhausted. You're right. I can't prove it. It doesn't mean it wasn't my fault. Emma paused, staring at Kent's red face. She seemed to be thinking about something beyond him. After a minute, she finally spoke again. What if it wasn't? Kent raised an eye. What? Why would you make yourself guilty if you didn't have to? What's that supposed to mean? Emma's eyes softened. I mean, you shouldn't put that weight on your shoulders if you don't have to, she went on. Put the blame on Liz and let yourself be innocent. Kent could hardly believe what he was hearing. What? He repeated. You want me to shift all of my blame onto Liz? She didn't do anything. Prove she didn't, Emma snuffed. The same way you can't prove it was you, we can't prove it wasn't her. Why the hell would I do that? Because I can see what it's doing to you to live with a dirty conscience, she added, her eyes growing larger and more intense as she stared at him. Don't make yourself hold on to all of that if you don't have to. And your solution is to pin it all on our dead friend? He shouted. Destroy her legacy by making her into some kind of killer? Emma rolled her eyes, taking a deep, frustrated breath. Look, Kent, here's the deal, she continued. All four of us are going to have to give testimony tomorrow about what happened on the mission. Every single detail. There are audio records of what happened, and right now, having witnessed them firsthand, it already looks to me like Liz is the one who did it. Kent grit his teeth, staring at her concerned face. As it stands, I think you have three options. Option 1, you don't elaborate on anything beyond what the records show, in which case Liz is the guilty party and you look like you're hiding something. Option 2, you tell what you think happened and you save Liz her sainthood, but you come off as a killer. And unless you create some elaborate lie to cover up how you actually killed him, there are going to be legal repercussions. You and I both know that can mean a serious headache for you if that's the case. Kent swallowed. What kind of legal repercussions? Emma shook her head. Well, unless you make something up, killing an unarmed opponent like that is a war crime. You could be dismissed for that. Ken felt his stomach drop again. But Jordan said they were attacked, Emma reiterated. Now, honestly, I don't know if I believe him, but the point is he and Margot are going to testify to that. And unless he also testifies that he witnessed the guard attack you after he was down, you taking the blame away from Liz, regardless of how noble you think it might be, it makes you susceptible for a ruling against you once the story is pieced together. Kent tried and failed at taking a breath. Emma noticed his shaking and put his hand in hers. Which leaves us with option 3, she voiced. I know you're going to hate this. I hate it too. But it's the only story that leaves you completely out of suspicion. And that is you tell them that Liz took him out completely. The company has no access to the body. They can't prove anything about the cause of the seizure. If you provide them with a story to fill in the gaps, they'll believe you. Ken squeezed Emma's hand tighter. You want me to throw her under the bus? He clarified. I don't want you to have to do anything, she denied. I want you to be safe. I want my friend to be safe. She accented the words by squeezing his hand back. Then she looked up at him with her enormous eyes. I don't want to lose you too. The words didn't hit him as hard as he thought they would, but still he was moved by Emma's sudden burst of loyalty. Liz remained at the back of his mind. But her family, he added cautiously. Won't that affect the trial? Emma laughed. You think they even have a chance of losing? She noted. The company gave them a written promise confirming Liz would never be put in any real danger. They've already won one case. I don't think they're going to lose another, especially not this time. Ken finally found the deep breath caught in his throat. Emma's eyes were still huge, staring deep inside him. What about your dad? He asked. Isn't he the one they're up against? Isn't he the reason she's dead? Emma gave a sad smirk. Yeah, she accepted. He is. To tell you the truth, Kent, my dad is screwed. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't care. Maybe he deserves it this time. He's the reason Liz is dead. He's the reason Johnny's gone. He's the reason my brother's gone. She sighed, pulling herself to her feet, then helping Kent to do the same. Screw my dad, she shuffled. You're my family now. Whatever story you decide to tell, just know that I'm going to be here for you no matter what happens. She leaned into his chest and gave him another tight hug. He was amazed at how much strength she possessed in such a small body. After half a minute, she pulled back, looking up at him with a hopeful smile. Then she leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. He almost certainly blushed. Thanks for telling me about your mom, she said, taking a step back to eye him fully. I know you're not big on sharing, but if you ever need to talk about it, or you just need a friend, I hope you know I'm always next door. Kent's voice floated without permission. You mean that? Of course I mean that, Emma laughed. Promise. She stuck her pinky in the air and held it out to him. What is that? He asked. This? She gestured, apparently surprised by his lack of understanding. The pinky promise. My dad and I used to do it all the time. Ken hesitated, then stuck out his own. Emma wrapped hers around his. It means I care about you, and I'm never going to break it. She released his finger, then put her hand back by her side. Thanks, he breathed. Thank you, she shadowed. For what? She blushed. For letting me know that I matter, she said. For reminding me that there are still good people in the world if I know where to look. Ken stood frozen, unsure what to make of her kindness. Now, if you don't mind, she concluded, I'm actually going to try to sleep. I can't imagine our first day back in school is going to be very fun. He shook his head blankly. No, probably not. I appreciate you, she repeated, grabbing her glass on the table and stepping back toward her room. Good night, Kent. Good luck tomorrow. Yeah, he muttered. Yeah, you too. She turned and walked through her door, leaving Kent alone again in the common room. His cheek was tingling. His arms were numb. Most importantly, he felt genuine happiness for the first time in days.